Rain tapped gently against the diner windows, a steady rhythm that matched the quiet lull of a Monday evening. Rosie's Diner, with its flickering neon sign and cracked red booths, might not have looked like much from the outside, but inside, it held the heartbeat of an entire community. And at the center of that pulse was Maggie Foster. She didn't walk, she glided, balancing 2 plates on one arm and a milkshake in the other. Maggie offered a quick wink to the elderly couple at booth 3 and crouched to wipe a straw wrapper off the floor before the baby in the next booth could grab it. Her auburn hair, always in a loose bun, had tendrils falling freely, brushing against her freckled cheeks. And though her shoes were worn and her apron had seen better days, her smile was untouched, like it had been stitched onto her soul by something stronger than circumstance. "Maggie, your heart's too big for your own good," Rosie had once said, her voice raspy from decades of frying bacon and offering advice no one asked for but everyone needed. Maybe it was true, because while other waitresses might stash their tips for new boots or a weekend escape, Maggie folded every spare dollar into a biscuit tin marked Hope Haven, taped shut beneath her sink. Hope Haven wasn't just a name. It was a home, a worn-down foster care center 2 blocks away, tucked behind an old church and a hardware store with a crooked sign. Maggie had discovered it one snowy night years ago when she followed the sound of laughter and found 4 kids building with mismatched gloves and threadbare coats. That night she left behind all the hot cocoa from the diner's shift and came back with blankets and beanies. She hadn't stopped coming since. To the kids at Hope Haven, she was Miss Maggie, too. Some of the youngest, just Mags. She braided hair with patient fingers, sewed buttons on shirts, helped with math homework she barely remembered herself. But most of all, she listened, really listened. She never told them she knew what it felt like to be left behind. To wonder why a parent didn't come back, to wait by a window that never opened. But maybe that's why she understood them better than most. That night, as the rain picked up and the diner quieted down, Maggie noticed a man in a corner booth she didn't recognize. He had a plain black hoodie pulled up, and a thick binder sat on the table beside a half-drunk coffee. He wasn't looking at a phone, just staring out the window, at the menu, at her when he thought she didn't notice. His eyes were sharp, but not unkind, watchful, quiet. "Need a warm-up?" she asked with a smile, holding the coffee pot like it was an extension of her hand. He nodded. "Please." His voice was deeper than she expected, polished, not the usual drifter type. Maggie poured the coffee, catching a glimpse of a sleek watch beneath his sleeve, one that didn't belong in a place like Rosie's. "You visiting family?" she asked. He looked up. Something like that she didn't push. The diner attracted all kinds. Broken hearts, passing truckers, students running from deadlines. Everyone had a reason. Everyone had a story. But something about this man made her uneasy, not in a fearful way, but like he saw too much. Like he was waiting for something. After closing, Maggie changed into her coat and headed toward Hope Haven with 2 large paper bags, leftover burgers, fries, and that slice of cherry pie little Lenny loved so much. She didn't see the man in the hoodie slip out of the diner behind her, keeping to the shadows of the rain-soaked sidewalk. Inside the center, chaos reigned in the most beautiful way. Kids laughed, toys clattered, and someone was singing off-key. In the hallway, the moment Maggie walked in, a girl with pigtails and a bandaged knee rushed into her arms. "Maggie, Maggie." Lenny bit the crayon again, and now it stuck in his tooth. "I told you, it wasn't food," Lenny shouted from the couch. She laughed, setting the bags down as a small stampede of children surrounded her. One by one, she handed out the food, kissed scraped knees, and settled a heated debate about whether dragons were real. She was home. But outside, the man in the hoodie stood across the street, leaning against a lamppost. His gaze never left the building. He took out a phone and opened a folder titled, "Holden Group, Acquisition Proposed, Demolition, 7 Properties Inc. 421B Oak Lane, Hope Haven." His finger hovered over the file, but he didn't open it. The next morning, Maggie returned to Rosie's, none the wiser that her world had already started to shift. Back in the office of Holden Group Enterprises on the 42nd floor of a glass building that pierced the sky, different version of the man in the hoodie appeared. Suit pressed, shoes shining, and eyes now colder. Ethan Royce, CEO, Billionaire, known for flipping dying neighborhoods into luxury condos and walking away without looking back. But something about last night haunted him, her laugh, the way the kids ran to her, that battered pendant around her neck. He had watched people hustle, fake kindness, beg for favor. But Maggie Foster wasn't asking for anything. She was giving everything and expecting nothing. That kind of person didn't fit in spreadsheets. He had planned to sign the demolition papers that day, but instead, he poured himself coffee and stared out the window, wondering why a woman who barely made enough to survive was fighting harder for those kids than anyone he'd ever paid 6 figures. He called his assistant, put a hold on the Oak Lane file. "Indefinitely, sir. Just do it." And that's when the surveillance request came in. Quiet, discreet, not illegal, but close. He needed to know more about Maggie, about the center, about why someone with nothing was acting like she had everything that mattered. And still, he didn't tell anyone that he was the man in the HOODIE. Because sometimes, the richest man in the room needs to hide to learn what real wealth looks like. And Maggie Foster, she had it in spades. Even if she didn't know someone was watching, and even if the man watching had the power to destroy everything she loved, or save it. A week had passed since the night Ethan Royce stood across the street from Hope Haven, watching through the rain as Maggie handed out laughter like it was bread. But he hadn't stopped thinking about her not once. He had watched hundreds of presentations from developers, engineers, and strategists. He had sat across from presidents and kings, but no one had looked at him the way she did because she hadn't looked at him at all, not like a man who mattered, just like a man who needed coffee. And now, every time he picked up the file labeled 421B Oak Lane, his hand paused. In the sterile glass walls of his empire, Maggie's voice kept echoing, even though she had only spoken a few words to him. She had no idea he was watching, that the man she offered refills to was the one with a signature that could flatten the place she loved. He'd gone to the diner again, dressed the same. She hadn't recognized him. She treated him with the same kindness, a smile, a refill, a napkin placed gently at his elbow. When she noticed he was scribbling notes on loose paper, that day, something shifted. "Hey, sorry about the wait," Maggie had said, sliding his coffee over without asking. "I wasn't in a rush," Ethan replied, and for once he meant it. Outside, the city moved fast. Cars honked. Deals closed. Papers were signed. But in Rosie's diner, time melted into something softer. Maggie moved like time didn't own her, and maybe that's what stopped Ethan. He had spent so long owning everything. He didn't know what it meant to slow down and feel. But this wasn't just about Maggie. It was about those kids. He had the full file now. Hope Haven had been struggling for years, short-staffed, underfunded, behind on permits. The city had already cleared the area for rezoning. The plan was to level the entire block, including the small playground beside it, and build executive lofts. Good for the skyline, his advisor had said. Brings value to the neighborhood. But that playground was the only place some of those kids had ever learned to swing, high enough to imagine flying. He didn't know why it mattered. It just did. Back at the diner, Maggie took her break outside. In the alley where the dumpsters lined up like a row of forgotten stories, she sat on a milk crate, sipping die-old coffee, flipping through a worn notebook filled with names and notes. Ethan followed, keeping to the shadows, pretending to take a call nearby. He listened. "Kenny needs new sneakers. Size 7. Asthma med. See if I can talk to Nurse Jordan. Rent's due. Behind again? Ask Rosie if we can do a fundraiser night. Maybe open mic." Each page was a map of her worries, none of them about herself. He could fix every problem in that notebook with a single phone call, but he didn't, not yet. Because the question wasn't whether she needed help, it was whether she'd accept it, and at what cost. That night, he made a choice. "Maggie," Rosie called after the shift, "do you ever think about doing something else? You're smart. You could have gone anywhere." Maggie smiled as she washed a mug. "This is somewhere." "Rosie?" Rosie shook her head. "You give your soul to that place. And those kids, they're lucky. But who's looking after you?" Maggie didn't answer. She just looked out the window at the empty street and said softly, "They saved me too, you know." Across the street, Ethan heard it. The next day, the Holden Group announced a new initiative, one that shocked the board, a philanthropic branch, focused on preserving community institutions, a sudden halt to the Oak Lane demolition, a promise to evaluate the property with human-centered impact in mind. The press was confused. Investors were nervous. Ethan didn't explain. He didn't have to, but he also didn't stop watching. He learned Maggie's routine. Morning shift, break, visits to Hope Haven, late-night planning. On weekends, she painted murals with the kids, sunflowers, and stars. Things that could outlast paint, if you looked at them long enough. She didn't know someone had anonymously paid off the center's overdue utility bills. She didn't know someone had spoken to the city inspector and bought time on the permits. She didn't know a man in a tailored suit had watched her teach a little girl to tie her shoes and felt his chest ache in a way he didn't recognize. Until the day came when everything almost unraveled. It started with a letter. Rosie handed it to her in a sealed envelope. "Delivered this morning. Had your name on it." Maggie opened it, eyebrows furrowing as she read. Then her face fell. Hope Haven had 30 days to vacate. The paperwork was old but suddenly enforced. A technicality missed in the preservation. Pause. Someone had dug it up and now it threatened everything. She didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, she folded the letter, placed it in her apron, and finished the shift. That night, she stood outside the center with her notebook, this time blank. She didn't know what to write, what to fix, how to stop what felt unstoppable downside. The kids laughed and played, unaware. Across the street, Ethan clenched the steering wheel of his parked car. He had power. He had resources. But what he didn't have was her trust. And he didn't want to take that by force. So he walked across the street. No hoodie, no disguise. Just Ethan Royce, man behind the threat. And maybe the man who could become something else. But Maggie looked up as he approached, confused. "You again." He smiled gently. "I think it's time we talked." The second Maggie saw him approach under the street lamp. Something in her shifted. Not fear, not even surprise. Just awareness. She had a gut for people, and something told her this man, this quiet stranger with the kind eyes and the mysterious habits, wasn't just another lonely customer in a booth. "You again," she said, more curious than confrontational. "I owe you a few answers," he replied, stopping a few feet from her, "and maybe a warning." The wind lifted the edge of her coat as she narrowed her eyes. What kind of warning? He took a slow breath, glancing toward the worn bricks of Hope Haven behind her. The kind that starts with something you already know but ends with something you never saw coming. She crossed her arms. "Try me." He stepped closer. "I've been watching this place." "Watching you?" "Yeah, I got that much." She tilted her head, voice firm but not harsh. "People don't usually drink 3 coffees and forget to eat, just to sit in silence for hours, unless they're hiding something." Ethan smiled faintly, not denying it. "I run a company," he said finally, "the Holden Group." Maggie flinched. She had heard that name. It was on the bottom of the eviction letter, on the documents tucked into the drawer at Hope Haven, that she couldn't bear to look at again. "You're the one," she whispered, words trailing off like they burned her tongue. "You're the one trying to tear this place down." "No," he said. "I'm the one who signed the original papers to tear it down, but I didn't understand what it meant until I came here." Maggie blinked at him, a mix of disbelief and dawning realization shifting across her face. Why would a billionaire care about a rundown diner, waitress, or a group of kids the system already forgot? "Because you didn't forget them," he said, almost too softly to hear. She didn't know what to say to that. For the first time in years, she felt unsteady, like someone had seen beneath the skin she wore like armor. "And worse, cared." He continued, "I didn't come here to explain away what I've done, or ask you to forgive it. But that letter you got, it was triggered automatically. I halted the demolition, but there are other players, investors, developers, people who don't care what Hope Haven is, only what it's worth." Maggie's jaw tightened. "Then stop them." "I will," he said, "but I need your help to do it." Her laugh came sharp, tired. "You want me to help you? What could someone like me possibly offer someone like you?" "Perspective," Ethan said, "a reason to fight." She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes unreadable. Then she looked past him, toward the building behind her. The windows glowed faintly from the inside, shadowed shapes of kids moving, laughing, alive. Not numbers, not liabilities, just children. And maybe, for the first time, she realized that someone else finally saw them too. "What are you really doing here?" she asked. He paused. "Trying to decide who I want to be next." And with that, he handed her a file. "Read this," he said, "then call me." She took it but didn't open it yet. By the time she looked up, he was already gone. Night. Maggie sat alone at her small kitchen table, flipping through the pages by the dim light of a single lamp. The file wasn't just about Hope Haven, it was about her. Photos of her helping kids. Notes on her fundraising attempts. Copies of letters she'd written to local council members. It was everything. He hadn't just been watching, he had been learning. But it was the last page that stole her breath. It wasn't a document, it was a photo, an old one. A little girl with tangled red hair, no more than 6, holding hands with a woman in front of a farmhouse. On the back, in fading ink, Margaret Foster, age 6, intake record, Pelton County Services. She hadn't seen that image in decades. Somehow, he had found it. She pushed the file away and covered her face, her hands shaking. This wasn't just business anymore. This man had seen into a part of her past she had buried deep beneath years of trying to build something better. The next morning, Hope Haven buzzed with the usual clatter of cereal bowls and toothbrush arguments. But Maggie was different. Focused, wired. She went straight to the back office and pulled out every document she had leases. Permits, old letters from donors, even a dusty box filled with event flyers and faded bake sale posters. She spread them across the desk like a puzzle. Only she could solve. Because now she knew. It wasn't about waiting for someone to save them. It was about standing up and proving they were worth saving. The kids were counting on her. Later that week, Ethan returned, but this time, he didn't hide. He wore the same tailored suit he wore in boardrooms, but something was different in his eyes. Less calculation, more hope. She met him outside the diner. No apron, no coffee. Just Maggie. "We're right," she said simply. "You shouldn't have come here expecting me to hand over trust like it's sugar in a bowl." "I didn't," he replied, "but I'm still here." She nodded slowly, then handed him a thick folder. "This is everything. Every corner we cut. Every fix we couldn't afford. Every time we had to choose between buying new beds or paying for the fire inspection. It's not a defense, it's a reality." He took the folder without a word. "I'm not asking you to be a hero," she said, voice quiet, "but if you really want to help, don't just save the building." "Save what it stands for?" His answer came without hesitation. "Then let's save it together." What followed was unlike anything Maggie had experienced. He brought lawyers, advisors. He invited city planners to walk the building. He negotiated with the investors, spinning a new vision, one where Hope Haven could be expanded, not erased, where community mattered more than condos, where stories like Maggie's were the foundation, not the obstacle. And as word got out, something strange happened. People began to show up. Former residents of Hope Haven, teachers who remembered those kids, neighbors who had walked by every day but never stepped inside. They brought tools, paint, money, time, because one person cared, because one woman lit a fire, and someone powerful decided not to put it out, but to help it grow. But change never comes clean, and in the shadows, not everyone was happy about the billionaire's change of heart. Someone was waiting, watching, planning, and soon, Maggie would have to make a choice she never saw coming. The wind picked up the day the first brick fell from the old chimney stack. It was a small sound, just a clack on the pavement outside Hope Haven, but Maggie felt it deep in her spine, like a warning. Things were shifting. Inside, the children were painting cardboard rocket ships for a school project. Maggie knelt beside little Toby, helping him glue stars to his control panel, while trying not to let the growing ache in her chest show. Outside, the world was moving. Lawyers were talking, plans were being restructured, donations were pouring in, and now everyone knew her name. She'd become the waitress, angel in the papers, the face of a last-minute community miracle. The diner was getting calls from reporters. Hope Haven was flooded with volunteers. And Ethan, he had made her a silent partner in his new initiative, something called Project Haven, aimed at rebuilding community centers without displacing the people who needed them most. It should have felt like triumph. But Maggie had learned through years of disappointment that the most dangerous moment isn't when you've lost everything. It's when you almost have it all and it could slip away. She noticed the black car parked across the street 3 days in a row. Not Ethan's. This one had tinted windows and never moved. A different man sat inside each time, staring at the building. Not community volunteers, not investors, just watchers. Then came the phone call. A voice, calm and smooth, asked for her by name. At Rosie's, Miss Foster. The man said, "We've been watching your progress. Quite the show. You and Mr. Royce have made quite a ripple." Maggie gripped the phone tighter. Who is this? Someone invested in that land, and someone who doesn't enjoy seeing his investments repurposed as charity experiments. "You're threatening a foster home?" she asked, a bitter laugh escaping before she could stop it. "I'm offering you a chance to step aside before things get complicated." She hung up before he finished the sentence. That night, she sat across from Ethan at a small booth in the corner of the diner. He'd started showing up without bodyguards now, like he wanted the city to know this wasn't a secret anymore, that he stood with her. She told him about the call. His jaw tensed. "They're bluffing." "No," she said, "they're pressuring. And I think they'll do worse if they can't make this go away quietly." Ethan leaned in, voice low. "Then we don't go quietly. We go public." She hesitated. "You want to take this to the press?" "I want to take this to the people. If they know the truth that Hope Haven was going to be bulldozed for luxury penthouses, unless a waitress gave up her entire life to stop it, then the pressure's not on us anymore. It's on them." Maggie glanced out the window. The same black car was back. "I didn't want this to become a fight," she whispered. "You didn't start the fight," Ethan said. "You just refused to let them win by silence." He reached across the table and gently tapped her pendant, the silver oval with the star. "What would your grandmother have said?" "She would have said to stand my ground," Maggie murmured. "But also, to keep my heart open." Ethan's voice softened. "Then that's what we'll do." Within 48 hours, the story exploded. A local news reporter ran a segment on Hope Haven's battle to survive. The emotional footage of children laughing inside a near-condemned building struck a nerve. Donations tripled overnight. #spread, #save Hope Haven, #mag, one building, one heart. And suddenly, Maggie wasn't alone anymore. But the next blow came faster than anyone expected. An inspector arrived at dawn with a clipboard and a sour expression. "We received a complaint," he said. "Claims of structural danger. Fire code violations. You'll need to evacuate the children within 72 hours unless the issues are resolved." Maggie stood on the porch, heart pounding. "But we've been working with the city. We've got an agreement in place." "Doesn't matter," he said. "This came from the top." Ethan arrived minutes later. His face told her everything. This was a power play. Someone with influence was pulling strings fast and hard. "Let me handle this," he said. But Maggie shook her head. "No, I need to be part of this now. All the way." Together, they met with city officials. Maggie stood in front of a room full of cold suits and spoke like she did at the diner plane. Honest and full of heart. She told them about every scraped knee she bandaged, every bedtime story she read on a couch missing 2 cushions. She spoke not as a victim, but as someone who refused to let invisible children remain invisible. Ethan watched in awe. She wasn't just strong, she was undeniable. And when the meeting ended, 2 of the council members approached quietly and promised to investigate the sudden complaints. But the battle wasn't over. That night, vandals broke the windows at Hope Haven. No one was hurt, but Maggie found a note taped to the door. "This isn't yours to save." She sat on the steps for a long time, her breath caught in her throat. Ethan sat beside her, silent, until she finally said, "This is bigger than us now." "It always was," he replied. "But now," she whispered, looking up at the cracked glass and the shadows beyond, "it's personal." In the days that followed, Maggie didn't sleep much. She split her time between fixing the damage, organizing new safety inspections, and continuing to serve at the diner to keep income flowing. Ethan began bringing legal teams into the open, challenging the ownership deeds, tracing shell corporations, shining light into places that had long thrived in darkness. And still, Maggie smiled for the children, painted more stars, told them bedtime stories about lions and underdogs and quiet heroes who never gave up. Because deep down, she knew hope wasn't just in the name of the building, it was in every breath they took inside it. But the hardest choice was still coming. And the next letter wasn't about eviction, it was about her, a new offer, this time direct, a six-figure salary, a leadership position in Ethan's foundation, a new apartment, security for the rest of her life. The only condition, she'd have to leave Hope Haven, relocate, become the face of the new initiative elsewhere. She stared at the letter for a long time. Everything she ever dreamed of was in that envelope, but the question lingered. Like a flame in the dark, could she leave behind the place that built her, to become something bigger elsewhere? Asterisk. She read the letter 3 times, and with each word, her hands trembled more. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a perfectly engineered escape, a life raft built from gold. Maggie Foster, waitress, guardian, orphan turned protector, was being offered everything she had once thought was out of reach. Health insurance, a furnished apartment in a safe part of town, a corner office at the Project Haven Foundation. Ethan's name was there at the bottom, handwritten. You deserve this. She didn't doubt that he meant it, that he thought this was the right thing for her. But as she folded the letter back into its envelope, her reflection in the diner's window stared back, tired and conflicted. Behind that glass were the same kids who used to run into her arms at Hope Haven, the ones who trusted her not just with their meals, but with their hearts. How do you walk away from that? The bell above the diner door jingled. She looked up. It was Ms. Carter, Marla, the elderly librarian who volunteered to read to the younger kids twice a week. She looked nervous, holding a worn-out binder to her chest. I heard, she said softly. Maggie managed a smile. Small town. Word travels faster than light. Marla sat across from her, fingers fiddling with a teabag string. I know this must be hard, but they need you here. Not in a fancy building with tinted windows and marble floors. Maggie exhaled, deep and slow. But what if me staying means they come after Hope Haven even harder? Marla leaned closer. And what if you leaving tells those kids that the world always takes away the ones who care most? That hit harder than any boardroom threat. Later that evening, Ethan walked through the diner's back door, not with a suit or a file this time but 2 coffees in hand. He set one down in front of her and sat. I'm not here to push, he said quietly. I just wanted to explain why I sent it. Maggie nodded slowly. Go ahead. You've spent your whole life giving, he said, and I watched you stretch yourself thinner than anyone should. You deserve a future that doesn't burn you out before you reach it. But that future means leaving the kids behind, she said. And maybe I could justify that if I believed they'd be okay without me, but I don't. Ethan looked at her, eyes shadowed with guilt. Then let's create a version where you don't have to choose. She raised an eyebrow. How? By expanding Hope Haven, making it self-sustaining, giving it a board, a structure, a future beyond any one person. Maggie hesitated. You're talking about a total transformation. I'm talking about turning this into a model, one that doesn't rely on any single angel to keep it alive. He reached into his coat and pulled out a rolled blueprint, spreading it on the counter. There were new dormitories, classrooms, therapy rooms, a cafe space where teens could work and learn job skills, solar panels on the roof, a community clinic. This is Hope Haven 2.0, he said, with you, as director, on your terms. She stared at the page. For the first time, her heart didn't feel like it was being pulled into. It felt possible, but possibility didn't mean easy, because later that week, someone filed a formal motion to freeze Hope Haven's assets. The group behind it. One of Ethan's former board members, a man named Grant Devereux, a silent investor with a lot to lose if the new vision took off and proved that profits didn't have to come from pain. Grant played dirty. Suddenly, City Hall appointments were delayed, paperwork went missing, and then came the smear campaign. A blog post accused Maggie of fraud. Photos were taken out of context, her handing envelopes to a man, a donor, her speaking angrily to a city official during the complaint hearing. It spread like wildfire on social media. Even the diner got a call from a gossip tabloid. You okay? Ethan asked, sitting beside her after one particularly long day. No, she admitted, but I will be. He smiled gently. You're stronger than you know, and more tired than I want to admit, she replied, half laughing. He reached across the table and took her hand, not in romance, not in obligation, but in solidarity. We'll fight this, he said. That night, she stood in front of a town hall full of citizens, neighbors, strangers, former foster kids, teachers, and for the first time, she told her full story. About growing up lost in the system, about the woman who gave her a pendant and a belief that kindness was powered, about the first time a child at Hope Haven called her mama, and how it shattered her heart and stitched it back stronger. I'm not asking you to believe in me, she said. I'm asking you to believe in them, in every child who just needs one person to stay. The applause was deafening. But what came next would matter more than words, because Grant Devereux wasn't backing down. And his next move, he wanted to buy Rosie's Diner, not for profit, but to destroy the only place Maggie still called home. Rosie's Diner wasn't just a place that served pancakes and poured too much coffee. It was Maggie's sanctuary. It was where she laughed, cried, scraped by. Where every tired parent, lonely old man, and broke student knew they could come and find a little warmth. It was the heartbeat of the neighborhood, and Grant Devereux wanted to shut it down. He made the offer, quietly straight to the landlord, bypassing any local channels. A sum too large for the struggling owner to refuse. The plan was clear. Tear it down. Replace it with a boutique office for one of his shell companies, and erase one more piece of Maggie's world. She found out from Mrs. Evans, the landlord's wife, who couldn't bring herself to lie when Maggie brought her usual rent payment. I told him you deserved to know, Mrs. Evans whispered, wringing her hands. He said they'd close it in 2 weeks. Maggie stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor where she'd slipped 1,000 times and caught every tray. Her chest tightened. They weren't just trying to ruin Hope Haven, they were trying to erase her. That night she didn't cry. She organized by morning. The diner was full of people, regulars, supporters, teenagers from Hope Haven wearing handmade shirts that read, "We stand with Maggie." Some brought flowers, some brought signs, some brought reporters. The story broke again. Waitress fighting for orphan kids now faces eviction from her diner job. Grant tried to spin it. His PR team released statements about redevelopment and neighborhood revitalization, but the people weren't buying it. Not anymore. Ethan showed up too. Not in a car this time, but on foot. He stood beside her in the parking lot holding a cup of diner coffee like it was armor. "They're losing control," he said. "That's why they're attacking everything you touch." "They're scared," Maggie replied. "You should be scared too," he warned gently, "because they still have reach." But she shook her head. "Let them come. I've got the one thing they don't." "What's that?" She smiled. "A community that believes in something real." And then, from the crowd, a voice rose. A boy, Jason, 17, once labeled unadoptable, stepped up to the makeshift microphone. "When I came to Hope Haven, I thought I'd end up on the streets. Or worse," he said, voice cracking. "Maggie made me believe I mattered, that I could be something. If they take this diner, if they take Hope Haven, they're not just taking a building, they're taking people's second chances." The crowd roared with applause, but the next day brought something no one expected. Grant Devereux was arrested on charges of fraud, money laundering, and illegal property dealings. The arrest made national headlines, and the tip that led to the investigation, it came from someone inside his own company, someone anonymous. Maggie sat with Ethan at the diner's back booth, rereading the news over and over. She asked. He nodded slowly. "I couldn't let him keep doing this. I knew things. I passed them where they needed to go." She stared at him for a long moment, emotion catching in her throat. "You risked your company," she whispered. He reached across the table. "It's not worth anything if it stands on broken backs." In the weeks that followed, Hope Haven's expansion began in earnest. With new protections, funding, and public support, it was transformed into a beacon of what real community work could look like. Maggie became its director, still wearing her apron in the mornings, still serving coffee when she could. Rosie's Diner stayed. A plaque was installed by the door that read, "In this place, hope was served daily alongside coffee, courage, and second chances." Ethan visited often, not just as a founder, but as a friend. Their relationship, forged through fire and quiet trust, was something deeper than any title. There were no grand declarations, just two people walking the same road, holding the same dream. And every Sunday, Maggie sat at the long wooden table in Hope Haven's new library, reading stories to the kids, her pendant still around her neck, her smile a little stronger, her heart, finally, full, because in the end, she hadn't chosen between love and loyalty. She had turned her love into something that could never be taken, and loyalty into something that saved more than just buildings, it saved lives.